I'm beyond excited for today's show. Karley Berry enters her fifth season at the National Football League as the Senior Director of Football Operations. In this role, she leads the league's strategic partnerships and initiatives that identify and strengthen the football pipeline ecosystem of football coaches, front office personnel, and future leaders. She also leads the NFL women's community efforts, which connect women across the football ecosystem by serving as a central platform for resources, events, programs, and initiatives to support and champion women involved in the game. She is based in LA and she is responsible for collaborating with NFL media on initiatives impacting football operations. Now, prior to this role, Karley served as the senior manager of game operations, safeguarding competitive equity and game integrity. She came to the NFL after serving as the special assistant to the commissioner at the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. And I'm just so blown away by her career, her experiences. She champions women in football, and you've got to hear her insight and how she is inspiring young women to work in sports. Take a listen. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to talk with you.
And I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Ashley.
Yeah, thank you. Everyone knows I love football and empowering women in sports, and you just so embody that. And I
Thank
just can't wait
you.
to get this started because you've had such an amazing career in football ops, and I would love for you to just walk us through some of that journey because we just talked about it. You're at Penn State, right? You graduated
Yeah,
from there, and now you work in football operations at the NFL. So I'd love to hear just the story and your journey so far.
absolutely. Well, again, thanks for having me on. We did kind of get into a little bit of the real, what feels like the impetus of my story, but I honestly can't say enough that my love for football started far before I attended Penn State. Um, and I really can't talk about my journey without talking about kind of how my faith intersects with it, just because a lot of the things that have happened in my life have just kind of felt like divine ordering. So for me, the reason that I say that, it came before Penn State, even though that was really my first work experience, was because football really was what I knew growing up. So the things that you do at home with your family, at least for me, like those were some of my core memories. And all I remember growing up is every Sunday, we're going to get wings, we're going to get together and put our jerseys on, and we're going to watch NFL football. And so I think at an early age, I kind of learned that football and family connection, which is so special for a lot of people. A lot of their best memories, right, are around watching games that matter to them with people that they loved. Um, and then just kind of how my life went. My brother, who's 5 years younger than me, played football, and we kind of made it a family affair again. So, in his little league teams, my dad was the team coach, my mom was the team mom. I would literally be on the sideline, like calling games, just doing whatever I could, to be a part of it. So again, that really pushed me to start associating football and family as one thing, and family is also a core value of mine. And back to that kind of faith divine ordering, how I even got my job at Penn State was beyond me, because I really didn't look for it. I told you that I went to Penn State. My mom also went to Penn State, which is kind of how I got my interest in that institution. Um and the reason that I was even introduced to the football team on a professional level was because my brother went on a recruiting visit. So my freshman year at Penn State, um, my brother goes on a recruiting visit. I go with him just because I'm his sister and I attend the school. And as we're walking through the facility and talking to some of the players and meeting with some of the coaches, I know a lot about the program. And I knew a lot about the program just because I love football. So it was not in my mind to like try to impress them to get a job. I just My mom went there, interesting enough, like same football coach, that was there at that time, was there when she was there. Um, and so I just knew from my interest in football. And so that his recruiting visit turned into me being offered an internship at the end of the visit, in recruiting. And so that was my first introduction to football and policy, because ultimately, recruiting is subject to NCAA, and then, your Big Ten policies around how you can do it. And that was really my first introduction to that. And so I tell students all the time that, when you're young and you have the opportunity to go down a career path that you love, you should identify that and go that route, because what was so important and just it really was critical to my journey was that I would go on game day, I don't know, 4 hours before the game started to the stadium. Sometimes I'm there on a Saturday, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., whatever ridiculous hours, right? Because that's just, game day's a long day. And I loved it. I wasn't getting paid. And I really enjoyed it. And that signaled to me like, this is an area that I should work in, because I'm not even getting paid. And I'm working ridiculous hours, and I'm having fun doing it. So I really think that mentally I made that decision my freshman year at Penn State, that I'm going to pursue a career in sports. Um, and then it kind of just took off from there. I did always know that I wanted to go to law school. So that was kind of my next steps after graduating from Penn State. And, I think sports also is, it's a relationship industry, and also, you got to have it on your resume. It's that area that everyone wants to work in. And I think I understood that also pretty young. So when I got to South Carolina and I started law school in my second year, I was looking for areas to work, and I kind of had to figure it out myself, right? Because my classmates who are using career services, their paths are a little bit more defined of the opportunities that are available to them. Whereas for like the intersection of law and sports, it's a little bit murky and not as clear. So I kind of had to figure that out myself. And so I just sent a ton of emails to the athletics department in different areas and was like, are you looking for an intern? um, I was willing to work for free. I knew that, that was likely going to be the arrangement that I had to accept. And I was absolutely okay with that. And then the compliance department reached out to me. At South Carolina, they do prefer to have law students as their compliance interns. So again, with the divine ordering, here I am now getting a second experience in policy, because that's ultimately, what it is, compliance at the collegiate level. And then, I graduated law school. I went on to work at the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference office. Um, and that is where I kind of learned more about where I wanted to go ultimately. And, while I like sports generally, my heart was always with football. And the best place to work in football is the National Football League. So I kind of started my quest while I was at the NEAC. To getting to the NFL. And for me, that looked like building my skills up, but it really looked more like building relationships in the league, so that when, an opportunity came available, that people knew who I was and were willing to take a chance on me. And that happened for me in 2020, and I'm still here by God's grace. So that's a little bit about how I got here. Divine ordering and just a love for football.
I love that so much. And what you mentioned about internships, because that those experiences are so transformative, and the things that you learn when you're in those spaces, especially like
Absolutely.
being in game day early and like being able to watch the people in those positions, how they're doing the work, what they're doing, and just asking them questions. Like it's always so important, and it's just so transformational. You learn so much when you're in that space.
You have to be curious. I think when you're young, like sometimes we pick a specialty too early, and anything outside of that we're not curious about. And I think when you're in a room with anybody who has some experience in some level, you're missing an opportunity when you don't have a conversation with them about what they know, what their journey looked like, what you can take from that. That was something that um, I think was intuitive to me, but was really important to my journey. Is I talked to a lot of people who were in positions I wanted to be in,
Mm,
about how they got there, and then determine for myself what the common threads were.
mm,
Because, sports it's a difficult industry to get into. It is, one of the most desired, if not the most desired, roles that exist in the country.
Hmm.
So that means that, when we post a job, you're getting the cream of the crop every time. And so
Absolutely.
I understood like I have to have information about how can I even get in here? Let alone do well, but how do I even get here? Um, and that comes from talking to people who have already done it.
Hmm.
Like, don't make your life harder. Talk to people who have done it and listen to them. Don't just think about what you can, get from them. I think that's another thing that I find sometimes with students. It's like they meet you and they're like, "Oh, so can you help me get an internship?" And it's like,
Hmm.
well, one, we got to get to know each other. But
Absolutely.
then two, I can be of value to you just in sharing what I know. There's value in that. So I totally agree with you. That was definitely something that early on I tried to do as best as I could.
Mhm. And the value too in like the different positions, because so many people view sports originally or getting into sports as like coaching or
Correct.
maybe being in like the fan services, right? Or certain things. But like I'm so curious about your work in football operations for those that don't know, what is that? What does that look like?
Yeah. And I love this question because this is another point that I try to hit with students as much as I can. Because you don't really know what you don't know. And to your point, I think for, young men, a lot of times when they look at the NFL, they only aspire to, play when there are a ton of roles. And I work with many professionals who also had a career in the league that now work on the business side. But, at the end of the day, like the league is a business. So any business aspiration you could have, there's probably a job that fits a skill set that you have, right? So, outside of football operations, we have an events department, a finance department, just like anyone else, HR. We've got, consumer products, for those who are into like merchandising. We have every business unit that a normal corporation would have. Um, we have at the league. And so for football operations, I will say at the league office, it looks a little bit different than how it looks at our clubs. And then also from a college athletic standpoint. So I think football operations is typically, more of a logistics type of role where you're putting things together from the team, from a schedule, from a travel, and just operationally everything they need to for game day to run smoothly for the team. That is, more from a team perspective, what they're doing. Football operations at the league is so much broader than that. I think anything that touches the game, ultimately, runs through our leader in this department, Troy Vincent. Um, and so, we've got these pillars of kind of player operations and how we build relationships and development for them. I'm a part of the business strategy unit, so what we do in pipeline development falls under that. But we've also got an officiating department that handles from an administrative, from a training standpoint, how we officiate the game. And then a game operations department. And that's really where I got my start. But that's about protecting game integrity and policy, and being an on-site presence, as the league at games. So that's another point that I like to hit with people that I meet because I think ultimately, and they'd have no reason to know, right? There are a ton of different roles that exist at the league that, take different skill sets. But ultimately there's kind of probably something for everybody, in our business, and in football operations alone. You wouldn't think it, but from a league perspective, I'm not the only lawyer that I know. There are several other um, colleagues of mine that like have a legal background. Like you wouldn't think that. You hear football operations and you think, again, logistics. And it can be that way, and it is that way, on a team level. But from the league office standpoint, um, I like to compare it to how a conference office operates toward the institutions that are in that conference, right? They are, they ultimately do work for those college presidents. However, their oversight in a way that They're ensuring that the fairness among all of their institutions, policies that relate to everybody, they are oversight for all of those teams. And so that's exactly how the league operates, and football operations is a part of that as well.
And I can imagine too, having your legal background, whether that's, we know that there's the tons of compliance and various,
Mhm.
legal things that you need in that background. Had that legal background really helped you in your role at the NFL?
Oh, certainly. I think mainly because, right, a lot of what I do um, is policy compliance. And so when you think of policy, you could kind of make that interchangeable with law. And so what they teach you in law school, right, is not just the ability to understand the law and or policy, right, in this case, as it's written, but how to practically apply it, how to interpret it and use the skills at your disposal to understand how it's supposed to be applied. But I will say generally, not just specifically to compliance, the skills that you learn in law school are very transferable to other areas of business, right? So they teach you how to analyze, how to think critically, how to write, in a way that is concise and consistent and clear, how to communicate effectively, how to work with other people. That, translate to any area of any business. So I think yes, my legal background has helped specifically with, compliance. Even, part of what I did in game operations was, the enforcement process for, when policies aren't followed. But even that is, there's some discretion, used in that process. So, you need to weigh when a situation warrants a warning versus escalated discipline. And you need to understand for your stakeholders, how do you educate them on what the policies are? Have you effectively educated them so that it's fair to, implement any discipline for those who aren't following it? So I would definitely say that specifically when it comes to compliance, legal training is the best way to be prepared for those roles. But I would say for anybody, who ultimately works in business, the skills that they teach you, the writing, the communication, how to protect a business, understanding liabilities and assets, um, that's pretty transferable to a lot of roles.
Yeah. And I think what young people should be thinking about here too is that you can have an interest in sports and have an interest in the law, right? And what you're saying in
Absolutely.
your career is that look at how well it's connected. Look how it's fit, right? So often we're boxed in, right? We're told to go through this one path, right? But you can have the interest in many things and look at your career, right? You've had the interest in the love for the sport and just this whole legal background and your own expertise, and you fit it together and look where you are now.
And honestly, it wasn't, and that's, where I speak of kind of like the divine ordering and how God plays a role and ultimately where I've ended up. I didn't plan all of this. Like I didn't honestly, I was probably in my third role before I even realized that policy was a thread in the roles that I had, and it was an area that I was developing an expertise. What I understood was I want to be in sports. The excitement around it, the there's so many things that for me football does that was my baseline. Like that's where I'm starting. How I contribute, I can figure that out. And that's really what I did. Like my role at the MEAC, they were really pivotal to me figuring out what I liked and what I didn't like and what I was good at and what I, maybe could grow in, because I got exposed to a lot. I often tell students, they tend to look at the Division 1 schools as, oh, I want to work there. But when you're starting out with no experience, for me, being at a lower resourced conference office meant that I got exposure and experience in places that I never would have, say, if I had started at a Penn State, where they have the budget to, have a department of 10 people. And when that's the case, they are paying you to do a specific job, and it can be a little bit difficult to get experience outside of that role. Well, where I was, they took the help where they could get it. And I was willing to show up in any area that they needed. And that was really critical for me being able to transition to the league because I came in, at a mid-level role. But it was because I had touched so many different projects and built so many skills while I was at the MEAC, that was really the thing that prepared me. So sometimes, I meet young people who, have adopted the attitude of the times, which can be like, I'm putting up my boundaries. I'm only willing to do what I'm getting paid for. And I will say in the sports industry, that thought process can hurt you, because you're only as valuable as like what you can show, because there are a ton of people who want to be in the role, right? So you have to have the experience, but also, even now as a senior director, I still have the mindset of like, if my leadership asks me to do something, I'm going to do it. I'm not a, this is not my job type of person. And I personally think that thought process has helped me, um, as I've grown in my professional career, because I don't think I'm above anything. And depending on what your perspective is, you can probably learn something from any project. It doesn't have to directly relate to where you want to go for it to be beneficial to you, at least in my opinion.
I'm so glad you mentioned that too, because I've seen this in politics as well, right? So many people, when you are starting out, are like, I want to work in the senator's office, the US senator's office. But when you work in a city council or a county council office, you literally are doing everything. You can
Yep,
help write the press releases. You can help schedule the meetings for that, that elected official. You can actually get to know the constituents too. And that's going to play a much larger role for you than if you are just in, of course, those higher, positions help, but it's helpful first to get on the ground and say, well, I did this before. I could answer phone calls and write constituent letters. I think
that's
I can
right.
do that in your office too. Like, I'm so glad you mentioned that because we don't talk about that mindset enough. We
Yeah.
just,
Well, there's a difference between, having a brand name or a company name on your resume that will help you get other jobs and actually having the experience that will allow you to get in that role and have confidence that you can figure it out. And that only comes from doing the work and having to use that figure it out muscle. That's another thing that I push a lot is like a lot of, I think what makes people successful in their roles is being able to be presented with a problem and figure it out. And so again, that muscle is built from doing it. It's not just built on its own. You start developing a confidence after you've had to figure it out a few times and you're like, oh, okay. Um, I can do this. I can be put in front of a task or put into a role where I may not know what I'm doing and feel sure that I will figure it out and I'll
absolutely.
figure it out well.
Mhm. Oh, I love that. I love that. Now, I'm also excited too to hear about all the work that you're doing to empower women in the NFL. And I'm also separately excited to ask you about just you as a woman working in
Yeah.
sports and fostering just inclusivity in the game. But let's start off first because you do a lot to champion women in the NFL. Can you talk to us a bit about that?
Yeah. So I, really recently came into, in addition to my role was leading the NFL women's community. And, for lack of a better term, was really excited about it because I'm a true girl's girl. Um, you know, with women, we can be catty sometimes, but there are those of us who really believe in like all of us succeeding, and pushing all of us forward. And that is who I am at my core. Is I never believe that someone else's light shining dims mine, and that is something that helps me in helping others as much as I can. So when the opportunity was presented, it was something that really excited me because um, you know while we've made a lot of strides as women in this business, there's still a ways to go. And so at the core, the NFL women's community is really about, first, it's about all women in the football ecosystem that touch the game, right? So that could be, our on-field officials, that can be our coaches, that can be women who work at the league like myself, women who work at clubs on the business side. But that's also, player wives. They'll tell you themselves they play a big role in their success, right? And so I think one of the things that really excites me about the women's community and what we're trying to do is that we're really trying to assist, the whole gambit of everybody who, touches the game in some capacity. But what we're trying to do is to support each other by connecting, with people that, are like-minded or have similar goals in this space. And then just providing tools for development. So whether that's, on the connection side, that can be more of just, receptions or opportunities, initiatives that bring us together. But on the developmental side, I think, that can look a ton of different ways based on what the group is, right? I mentioned there are a ton of different groups that need to be served differently. And what's exciting to me about this role is the challenge of figuring out how do I help each group in a way that's best for them, right? Because it can't be a one size fits all. And so, yeah, I think ultimately, like I said, we have made a lot of progress, women in this space, but we've got a ways to go. And that's only going to come from continuing to champion and support each other, continuing to provide resources, to one another, mentor one another, and to just stay connected. So that's really what the women's community is about. And, I'm excited to see how it's going to evolve, now that I'm, kind of leading the efforts and the charge. But the women that have led this group before me have done a great job of just bringing us together to just have a familiarity with who's in the space. And we're just going to keep building on that.
I love that. I love that. And so many young women have reached out and asked, how do I get started in this space? Like, what advice do you have for women that want to work in sports? Maybe they want to work in football ops, or maybe they're just really interested in sort of pushing, right, a little bit and understanding how they continue to break the barriers for, male-dominated spaces. Like, what advice do you have?
I love this question. This is like one of my favorite to answer. And what I'm going to say is going to be different based on, where women are in their careers. So I think for those who are trying to break into the industry, it's a little bit about what we already talked about, right? If you're in a role, even a role that's not related to sports, you need to get your hands on as many projects and experiences as you can. And if your role doesn't afford you the ability to kind of branch out, that means volunteering at every event that you can. That means, raising your hand for things that, the jobs that, quote unquote, don't look sexy. Because when you're young, right, what's going to set you apart is your experience and being able to talk about the things that you've worked on, even if your title doesn't reflect that experience. There's a lot of value in being able to speak to the things that you've worked on, whether you're a leader on it or not. So I think for women who are trying to break in, I think that is one of the most important things, kind of gathering that experience. And then it's relationships. I mentioned earlier, like these roles are highly coveted. When you talk about the league, but sports generally, even the college roles, a lot of people want to work in this space. And I think sometimes we don't have the mentality of that means that the interview process is highly competitive. That means that while you're great, right, and you may have 4 or 5 sports experiences on your resume, you might go against, be up against someone who has 7, 8 experiences, along with a master. Like it's a competitive space. And I think that sometimes we don't look at that enough when we're trying to break in. I know for me, I felt very confident in like, I went to 2 Power 5 schools and, had the opportunity to work for both athletic programs. I had a law degree. I thought I was a shoo-in to get whatever job I wanted. And that's absolutely not how that went, when I graduated from law school and was looking for jobs. So, I think that speaks to not that I wasn't talented, but that it's a competitive space. And so when you take that approach and you are curating your resume and your experiences with that mindset of, hey, I see resumes now, Ashley, of people that are still in school that have like 8 internships and experiences in sports, and I'm impressed. So that's what you're going against. Even right out of college, some of these, some professionals are already have a lot under their belt in sports. And that matters. So that's what I would say for those trying to get in. It's a relationship business, so you need to know people. But your resume needs to reflect that, you're pursuing a career in sports. For those who are already in and looking to move up, um, that's I think my advice might be different, than some others. I think sometimes we tend to focus a lot on like being known, um, uh, being liked internally by, the people that are seen as the power players and those things. And I think at some point there's gotta be like the number one thing should be being really good at your job. And sometimes that gets lost on people. Like, if you want to be very valuable to a company, then do your job in a way that makes you not them not want to lose you. And that's very simple, but I think it gets lost at a point and people think like, oh, well, if enough people know me, yeah, that might get you in a room, but then when you're in that room, you're gonna have to perform. And so, I tend to be of the belief that like if you are doing really good work, eventually the right people are gonna take notice, and that is gonna propel you forward. And so I think once you get in, um, for me, that should be the number one focus. And all the other things are important, right? Like the professional development opportunities and, having a name in the industry and, networking with your colleagues is important. But I think that once you get the opportunity to be in fine tuning your skills, and doing really good work, maybe should be more of a focus than it is sometimes.
Absolutely. It's so true. You have to be able to do that work so well because you can like talk so much, but if you're not at the end of the day, if you get into that role, you need to be doing that those tasks, right? We
You
forget
have
about
to
that.
perform.
Yes. It's so true. It's so true. Just like if you're any athlete on the field, right? You need to perform.
Yes.
Mhm. I love that so much. And I hope that people that are listening to this really take your advice when it comes to the outreach, asking the right questions, not, oh, can you help me get this job? But tell me about your job. Tell me about you, right? Those questions are going to make a huge impact and difference, right? So I love that. My favorite question to ask, and it's just it just embodies everything I think that you're doing, and I'm curious how you answer because there's been so many different ways that people have answered. My
Okay.
question is, what does unleashing your inner queen mean to you, and how do you unleash your inner queen?
That one is a really, really good one. I can think a little bit against the grain. And so, when I think about inner queen, right? Like what qualities does a queen embody in most instances, right? And I think the things that most people are going to look at, right, is that leadership, the ability to, get people to do a job or do it well, or, being graceful or kind of having like a strength, right, about you. Um, I'll be honest with you, the ones that most resonate with me, and the way that I'm trying to go about my professional journey are, humility
Mhm.
and integrity. I think when you get into these spaces, where the jobs are highly coveted and people really want to move up, I think sometimes character can get lost. And
Mhm.
sometimes we feel like we have to compromise in order to get ahead. And for me, unleashing my inner queen looks like being proud of the woman that I am behind closed doors and the decisions that I make, how I relate to other people, and yeah, the way that I do things. I want to be somebody who leads with empathy, who cares about other people. And sometimes in business, it can be dog eat dog, right? Sometimes we refer to the people that are really good at business as sharks. Um, and the kind of woman that I want to be and the kind of queen that I want to be is one who um, is very good at her job, unequivocally, unquestionably. But I also want to be a good person too. And so I think sometimes that's not talked about enough. And, what I really want for us women to do is like be good people and support each other, not have that mentality that like it can only be me. I think people who help others and bless others are ultimately blessed themselves. And so that's honestly what I can tell you. The thing that I'm most proud of myself is the way that I've gotten to where I've gotten because I haven't had to compromise my integrity to do it. Um,
Oh, I love that. You are just absolutely incredible. And I hope so
Thank
many
you.
people listen, take your insight. And I just can't wait to see how like everything continues to just unfold for you. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. You're so inspiring. You inspire me. So thank you so much for, taking the time. And we just talked about earlier, this is such a busy season, as
Yeah.
whole year round is, but like especially now. So we just so appreciate you being willing to connect.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. And I will say I think that the work that you're doing is incredible.
Oh,
I think you strike me as another girl's girl, and someone who, really wants to and has built a framework, to help us to get ahead. So we need more of you around here. So
oh,
yeah, it was a pleasure to do this.
oh, thank you so much.